So I'm very excited to present this, and it's not just me. We have actually a chorus of SIM members who went on this, well, as our teacher, my teacher, Gil Farnsdale says, historical event in the Insight Meditation community. And that is, a group of us went to Cambodia in about 2 months ago. And I would say all of this started with this, all of this meaning the organization, Insight World Aid, and this trip. With, this is from the Dhammapada. A lot of you know this. This is kind of a real pithy synopsis of the Dharma, and basically doing no harm, engaging in what's skillful, and purifying one's mind is the teaching of the Buddha. So we wanted to take our practice, which, a lot of what we teach here is an internal practice, right? We meditate, and we do it really to purify the mind so that we can then be relationally more skillful and non-harming. And then, I believe ultimately what the Buddha taught and mindfulness meditation is useful for is to take it to the paradigm of relieving suffering on a global scale in the world around us. So that's where the theory came from. And our organization was born here and in Redwood City at Insight Meditation Center about 3 years ago. I had gone on a number of medical missions just as a participant. These were all Catholic organizations who put together these really nice missions, and my teacher Gil said, well, how come we're the Buddhists? Where's the Vipassana people? Where's the Insight Meditation? And there's, not to be glib, there are organizations doing it. There's a really worldwide relief organization called Tzuchi, Tzuchi. It's from Taiwan, and they're a large multinational Buddhist-based aid relief organization. But in this country, we have the Buddhist Peace Fellowship. We have some small organizations that are doing socially engaged practice, but nothing really in our Insight Meditation, our IMS Spirit Rock community. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Steve Armstrong, who's one of our visiting teachers, has an organization called the Myanmar Schools Project, or Burmese Schools Project, and they go and they fund various schools and nuns and nunneries in Burma each year, and they're very involved with that. We have the Delete Project, and Mike, did we pick a date that you're going to present?
June 20th.
June 20th. Our own Michael Patty will be presenting a SIM, another SIM homespun project of benefiting the Dalit women and children in India. Very important project we've been involved with for 8 years or some.
I think like
7 years, yeah. So definitely come to that. That would be good. Slides too?
Slides, movies.
Oh wow! Multimedia experience, not to be missed.
Hopefully a video greeting from Bulgaria, if I can get Sister Mary.
A satellite uplink?
No.
Okay. Wow, I have to say, the SIM is hitting the major dips there.
Well, I left a flip camera there, and that's been challenging. This little video, so I'll take your last one.
Okay, so we chose Cambodia just because, and our organization, even though it's kind of born from a Buddhist perspective, an Insight Meditation perspective, is really not exclusively. So just like I was going on Catholic service trips, and and in those organizations and in our organization, there's no evangelicalism, there's no proselytizing. We don't teach people meditation. It's just a practice. If you're on the trip as a volunteer, the teachings are available in that way. So I just want to be clear about that. But we chose Cambodia because we had a lot of connections. It's a Buddhist country. It's a country that there's a lot of poverty. I think a lot of you know about the Holocaust that they suffered there in the 70s with the Khmer Rouge and the Pol Pot regime, which killed estimated 1 to 2 million Cambodians. We'll never know the true numbers. We'll know more about that later. So we have a lot of connections there, and I started going there annually about 3 years ago to research and to really find out if this is something that we could do feasibly, safely, find partner organizations and individuals, and that went very well. And we really wanted as part of our trip the meditation piece, because you can go and do good stuff in the world, but if you really don't do it from a grounded base, I believe, anyways, from a practice, and in my case it's insight meditation, but I know other religions and other faiths and other systems that help you be focused and be contemplative, so that you're not, we're not going out there and creating more harm than good. So easy to do. There were so many, especially the word mission, I mean, right? You think about, I don't know if any of you saw that movie, The Mission, from I think the 80s or so. It was really kind of a horrible mission. I won't go into the details of going to, I think in that case was South America. Yes, ma'am.
I was going for you to finish, but Mike, I'm curious to know what kind of medicine you're prepared or have permission to do. What do you expect to see at your clinic?
Yeah, well, we went already, so we have some slides. I'll talk about what we saw, what we did, and just generally, these are big undertakings. To do this, you need to get a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Health, and it's all done legally, and everyone who's doing clinical work has to be licensed and checked out, and it's not like going to a third world country and setting up a lemonade stand and putting on band-aids. It's a really big undertaking, and so just to finish the other piece I was saying is I really believe in the organization. It's just not me. It's really, we have a board. It's a nonprofit organization. We have a board. We have a lot of volunteers, some here in the audience, that really want to be of optimal good in the world and not cause any more harm or damage. And that's so easy to do with cultural differences and just working with our own defilements, our own reactivity. And if you take this guy out of his element into a hot climate, and so we really need, I think, the meditation, and then there was also a group process that was very helpful, a real kind of natural evolution of connection and cooperativity and sharing developed in our group. So this is Cambodia in Southeast Asia. The capital is here, Phnom Penh. We went to a 6-day clinic here in Takeo, which is one of the provinces. Also, a subgroup of our Insight World Aid people went to the Wadopot Children's Orphanage. We'll hear more about that, and that was about halfway between the capital and Takeo City. And then after our mission, after the actual work, we took a bus up to Siem Reap, which is where Angkor Wat is, and then had some sightseeing, and then ended with a day-long meditation retreat. And we have a lot of organizations that we partner with, that we get funding from. Here's our local valley. And then this organization, Cambodian Health Professionals Association of America, they're the group that we went with. They actually did the infrastructure. So these are survivors of the killing fields who came as refugees with, literally the shirt on their backs, and then, got jobs as janitors and taxi drivers, and then went to medical school and nursing school and law school, and became the American dream. And rather than just resting on their laurels, enjoying their Mercedes, and having a nice life for their children, they're going back to, and they're really dedicated to going back to their country and helping. It's really, the country really was set back to what he called year zero, Pol Pot called year zero, and it's taken a while to build developmentally, and it's uneven now. That there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of favoring big business and multinational organizations, and the little people are definitely being left out in many cases. So this was an organization I found out about last year, and I really was in close contacts. I went down, they're based in Long Beach in LA. I went down there and met the leadership. I went to one of their fundraisers. Really, we investigated them as a corporation and really found that this was a a group we could trust. They're also a Buddhist group, although they don't practice, and they're very non-denominational. But just naturally, most Cambodians are Buddhists. They were raised that way. So it was a good fit for us up front, and then in retrospect, I think it was a really great fit for us, and it worked really well. And we'll probably go back with them next year. So that's all I want to say here. And then a lot of people, some people here on the list were donors, and these are our. This is my wife, Jenny Mueller. She's always done a lot of work for the organization, and there's some people here. Our board of directors, we have advisors, and then our bloggers on the trip. So we really had quite a course of many people helping with this. And then we also had a fundraising campaign to everyone on the trip, I should say, paid their own way. There was no donations don't go towards helping volunteers. People can do their own fundraising on our trips, but we don't want money we raise. We want the money we raise to go directly to aiding people. In this case, we had $4,000 that was donated to CHAPA, which they bought medications and supplies for the clinic, and then $1,000 to the orphanage, which I'm told will go to the school fees, which is a significant most of the expense they have. And then Vitamin Angels provided us with 2 pallets. It was something like half a ton of daily children's chewable vitamins that we carted over in our suitcases to put in the big pool of medications. There was a whole bunch of medications and supplies that were brought over, but specifically our group brought over all these vitamins, which really were put to good use. Proper nutrition is really an issue in any kind of developing nation, but especially in Cambodia. So the rest of the talk will be some slides about the different segments. So we'll talk about the clinic, and there were 18 of us that went to the clinic. We'll talk about Wat Pat. There were 8 volunteers that went there, and then we all got back together again to go to Angkor Wat, and there was also some sightseeing at some of the historical sites that commemorate and document the tragedy that occurred there with the Khmer Rouge. So this is the outside. It's kind of hard to see, but this is a large complex. The Takeo Provincial Referral Hospital is a hospital in this small town called Takeo that has the usual services and buildings. It has an emergency room and some surgical suites and OB obstetrics, and it has actually there's a regional AIDS clinic there. There's just a number of departments on this campus, but as you can imagine, with just the funding and all that, it's just it's not a place you'd want to go for care, and it's where we would want to go, and there's a lot of people who actually can't afford to go there, don't get proper services, and there's things like if you go get checked into the hospital, you have to buy your own medications, unless there's you have some other organization who's sponsoring it. So it's a really complicated. Our system is in many ways really a mess, and theirs is too. So this is a lot of information on here, but there was a question about different conditions and all of that that we treated. I will say that the overall CHAPA team was 172 people with 40 medical students, Cambodian medical students who were our translators. They're learning medicine in a medical school in English, with English textbooks and English lectures. So they were incredible translators. This is. I did a mission back there 2 years ago, and we had high school students translate, and that was a little bit rough at times. So, and it was great for them because they got to see, they got to practice English, these medical students, and also learn firsthand. So many diseases. We had surgeons, we had dentists, we had psychologists and therapists who actually did amazing good, considering the time restrictions and the language barriers. So this is our team in our spiffy uniforms. You probably recognize a few of us here. We'll be hearing from Ellen Pettit. And who else is here? Judy, are you in there? I think you were still on. Oh, here's Chris Conte who's here today as well. There I am. And Kent Wang comes sometimes to this song. He also goes to SBMG at times. And this is his brother Neil. So Kent's a professor at the UC Davis here in physiatry or basic rehab medicine, and his brother's an ER doctor. And these are there's some physicians, nurses, therapists, people who are educators. We had a microbiologist, just all walks of life. We don't need to be a medically trained or in that field to be of use on these trips. And this is kind of the setup we had. Different places there would be a physician, this is Paul, and then you'd have a medical student translating, and he would then ask some questions of the patient, do an exam, and prescribe some medications. And this is Nancy. She's a secretary of the organization. She's a professor of nursing and public health in the Bay Area, and she's a nurse midwife as well. So this woman came in with twins. This is one of the babies. The other one's not there, but doing well. And she had a horrible condition called preeclampsia, which can be rapidly fatal, and would have died if it wasn't for the fact that Nancy and an obstetrician were there, and they did an emergency C-section, which wouldn't have been possible. And so this woman named her baby, there's a boy and a girl, and this one is the girl that she named Nancy. And the boy's name was named after the male surgeon. Usually you go on these trips and you don't actually save a life. You do good and you help people, but this was very dramatic.
And Jeff, does this work by you kind of show up in the morning and take whoever walks in the door, or for you?
Yeah, actually it's very well organized. I didn't go into the details, but basically people show up, they line up. Oh, here's Kent in the back. We just showed a picture of you, Kent. Yeah, welcome. And your brother. It's very well organized. People have to register. It's free, we should say. No one pays. But we could only take about 1,000 patients a day, with that number of people and with just the flow and the logistics. So there were people that were turned away each day and then they come back. So at the end of the week, we actually had seen most of the people in the area that wanted to be seen. And of course, some of the conditions were way beyond our, the big thing is we saw people with advanced AIDS and rare conditions like thalassemia, which is a little more common there, but it's a blood condition that just require a lot higher level of service than we could offer in a short-term thing like this. But we did a lot of good. And here's hold on. There is Judy here, giving an English lesson and talking with this I think she was a teenager, maybe 13 or so. This girl she was waiting. So a lot of people who aren't basically maybe with medical skills were useful with crowd control, with escorting, with just comforting. A lot more than the medications we give or the treatments we give. Just the smile, the warmth of someone caring about them, it really goes a long way. And here's Ellen, and she'll talk about that in a bit. And then we had some Buddhist monks who were registering. This kind of shows that flow. So these people in the back here, sitting or squatting, are waiting, and then they come in, they get given a ticket number, and then you can't see it here, but there's a button. They come in droves, and they're seated, and then they go through triage. And there's a whole flow to the system and different stations that they go through. So they get registered, they get some patient education, they get triage, which is blood pressure and vital signs and just some basic information. Then they see a provider, a doctor, a nurse practitioner, physician assistant, and then they go to pharmacy or they'll go to mental health. We had a separate mental health clinic that they could be seen at. And then also, I think I have a slide here of a special service that Kent was offering. Or they go to dentistry was the other thing. Or we did some surgeries too. So here's one of our volunteers, Therese, who is also entertaining kids with balloons while they're waiting. It can be a very frightening time to wait to see a foreign doctor. And this is just a slide. This guy broke his wrist a few days ago, and it was just kind of flopping around there. So we didn't have any supplies. We were out on the mobile clinic that day, but basically, they would service rice in these big aluminum, serving trays. Maybe you've seen them. And they had lids to them, and that's made out of aluminum. So I just took one of those lids and folded it up and found a little banded wrap here and wrapped his wrist up. That's basically what we do in the emergency room. So why not? And heal. He liked it and protected it. Didn't have an X-ray, but I knew it was broken. It was pretty deformed. And this is Kent doing a prolotherapy injection for a painful knee here. And he's very helpful with those injections. So that's the clinic, and I need to kind of pick up the pace here to let other people speak. But I'm going to show a few slides. When I was doing my research, I encountered this orphanage in a rural setting, and it was an amazing place. This place started as a hospice for people who were dying of AIDS, and what happened is people who were dying of AIDS, a lot of them didn't have, they had children who either did or didn't have HIV positivity, but the parents would die, and then the kids had nowhere to go. There was no family members, so they just, over kind of the course of time, this hospice for adults converted into an orphanage for children. And at one point, the director of it, Wayne, said, "These kids have seen enough dying. We can't take any more hospice patients. We'll take care of our HIV kids, but it's going to be just an orphanage. It's not going to be a hospice anymore." So, and this was a bit risky, going here, because we had our main clinic and we had a group, and so we split off this satellite group of 8 people that would go and find out what they were going to do and how they were going to be of help. And it was, I think, we'll hear in a minute, it was a successful experiment. So this is Wayne, who is the director there. He's an American man, and he's giving out the HIV medications. About a little less than half of the kids are HIV positive, and they still take in HIV positive children. They, it was also a radical experiment there for them because of the stigma with HIV, that a lot of Cambodians wouldn't want kids who don't have HIV commingling with kids that do. So there's a lot of hurdles they've had to overcome in their years. This is Melinda. She's kind of the second in command there, and she's just amazing, just in terms of running this place. There's about 50, 60 kids there. And here's our volunteers. You may recognize some. So here's Terry Townsend, who will hear from in a minute, and Pam Bressett. Yeah. And then I don't think anyone else from our Sangha. Most of the rest of these are from the Bay Area. And here's one of our volunteers doing an art class. They went for a little hike. I like this picture. This is Rick. He's a Buddhist chaplain and a mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher in the Bay Area, trauma worker. It's probably hard to read this, but this is the 5 precepts, and this was a little sign that I photographed, not this year, but the year before, near a Watto pot. It's on a little billboard there. It says, "Do not harm any living being, do not steal, avoid actions that are harmful to your body and mind, respect each other, speak kindly of others." So that's how they translated in English from the Khmer. I don't read that. Yeah,
I like that wording.
Yeah, I don't know.
Especially for kids.
I don't know who made this. It's all in, oh, it says Germany at the bottom. Well, most of these fancy, there's a lot of NGOs, non-governmental organizations that are working there that are trying to get the country back on track. These are lotuses arising from the mud. Okay, I just want to show a few. I'm going to go through the sightseeing ones. That's Angkor Wat, which is a big temple complex that was about 11th century, 12th century built, and it was originally built as a Hindu temple, and then it was Buddhist for a while, and Mahayana Buddhist. It had a long history, but it's an amazing place. This is the one of the heads of Bayon of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara was Mahayana Buddhism at that time. Here's our volunteers from Angkor Wat wearing our sticky shirts. And that's Bayon. There's a lot of different temple complexes in there. And then we also had nice dinner and sightseeing. Now this is this is Tuol Sleng. This was a high school that the Khmer Rouge converted into a detention center, a prison, and a torture camp. And so as part of the sightseeing, it's all optional, of course, but a number of the volunteers went there and were led around by this man who I will let Ellen talk more about, but he was a survivor. The only survivor, one of two survivors from that horrible time. And so this is a museum now that you can go to and see, to learn more about what happened with the Khmer Rouge and the killing fields. And this is the killing fields. Ekchung, how do you pronounce it? It's basically outside of Phnom Penh, and there's killing fields all over the country, unfortunately, because he emptied the cities. The Khmer Rouge emptied the cities of all their inhabitants and made them be, forced hard labor and growing rice. And so, in every province or places where people were detained, tortured, and killed, and the sign says, "Killing tree against which executioners eat children." That's the way they translate it, but it just kind of symbolized the human suffering that occurred there. This is one of the posts where people were tied various things. Someone else one of our bracelets there. So I think what I'll do, we did different meditations, and then we had a day-long, so this is us meditating at the clinic one morning. And I'll say that we were probably the only meditators on the group, the Insight World Aid group. In the larger group of Chapa, not many people meditate that I talked to, and so they were quite impressed with our group. Someone else, one of the other volunteers, took this picture who was with us, and they wanted to join us. And then we had a day-long meditation retreat in this. A friend of mine had this beautiful apartment in Phnom Penh, and we had some teachings, and so those are the slides. So I'd like to be silent now and have, would you like to come up? Do you just keep this on in the background? Or
Hi, I'm one of the volunteers that went to the Takeo Clinic. And I want to say that doing a medical mission is an extreme sport, and you do it at your own risk. Only kidding, it's not a sport, but it is pretty extreme. But the risk is really worth it. Christine would say many times during this is worth 2 years on the cushion. And if you do anything like this, I can promise you a few things. Your heart will be broken. You will have many experiences of joy, and sometimes simultaneously. The very thing that's breaking your heart just burst it wide open. And you will encounter many teachers in strange forms sometimes. And it will take a long time to process. You know, I'm up here speaking, but it's still unsettled, and I'll be working this for a long time. Jeff collected for years some beautiful poetry, and I want to just sprinkle some of it through. And before we even left, he gave us this Blessing for the Traveler by John O'Donoghue. When you travel, you find yourself alone in a different way, more attentive now to the self you bring along, your more subtle eye watching you abroad, and how what meets you touches that part of your heart that lies low at home. When you travel, a new silence goes with you, and if you listen, you will hear what your heart would love to say. A journey can become a sacred thing. May you travel in an awakened way, gathered wisely into your inner ground, that you may not waste the invitations which wait along the way to transform you. What a way to begin. And he had meditations for the bus, for the airplane. The airplane was really good, actually, because we get, you know, when we are going on a big flight like this, you get very self-absorbed, and meditation was just reflecting on how everyone's feeling the same thing. What did I leave behind? Am I going to make my next plane? Who am I going to get stuck sitting next to? Will I sleep? And it was very helpful to me because in the, in the row in front of me there was a crying baby, and directly behind me, a little toddler who was frustrated and liked to kick the seat in front of him. And I thought I couldn't relate to him because I want to do the same thing, but I thought of his mother, and that I could feel myself softening. And somewhere before Taipei, I fell asleep, and we took a break in Taipei. And you knew that you were on the other side of the world because you couldn't get M&Ms, but you could get meditation. There were these little meditation centers, the gardens. It was just really a lovely, lovely place. And then on to Nankai. And we had sort of one day there to tour. And, you know, they wanted to show us everything. So here we are, dazed and jet lagged. And we go to the beautiful palace, and then we go to the torture museum and the killing fields. And it was really very powerful. And I felt even a little vicariously PTSD'd at the end of it, because even any day like that would be rough, but here we were jet-lagged and feeling kind of vulnerable. And one of the things that struck me about the place was, you know, I'd been to Dachau, but I was there with a Jewish friend, and we were going to pray and dance at a synagogue. And there was a synagogue in Dachau and many other churches. And you went through the grim part, but there was this sense of triumph, triumph over evil. And I didn't get that in these places, that somehow this trauma is still very much in the air, and if there's any triumph, it's uncertain. And the man who was the survivor wrote a book, and he's trying to get collections to help these centers continue. And he made a plea, you know, please tell your children, tell your grandchildren that this happened and that it could happen again. And I was reminded of like a Sinead O'Connor song that she did in rap, actually. It was about Ireland, not Cambodia, but the refrain was the remembrance and then the forgiveness. And I just felt like this man so wanted people to bear witness. So I can't believe I volunteered to talk about this part of the trip, but I think I'm responding to him, and it's still part of the mission for me. And Jeff already said a lot about what went down, and all the major powers contributed to the Khmer Rouge, which just means red communists taking over. And I knew that there were, we bombed Cambodia, but I didn't realize the extent that we bombed them more than we bombed the whole Pacific theater, including Japan, during World War II. So we played some role in it. And then I also realized I knew about the killing fields and it was bad, but that's it. And it happened after the Vietnam War ended. So we were just so, I think, in this country, so relieved, and the women's movement was bursting open and all sorts of things with civil rights. So, and it was also, as a country, completely closed off. So there was just, I certainly didn't know the extent of the damage. But it was an extreme Maoist ideal. And the Cultural Revolution actually was already beginning to fail, and they were out to prove if you're just tough enough that this can be pulled off. And the ideal was the peasant who was uneducated. So anyone who was, we wouldn't make the cut, anyone who was educated, skilled labor, professional, you would be killed. If you had too white skin, or soft hands, or glasses, you might be targeted. And some people actually escaped and were called back. You know, we really need your expertise to help the country, and they came back and they were tortured and killed. So if you made the cut, you wound up in these basically slave camps, and you were separated from your children who were indoctrinated, and family ties were discouraged, the monks were killed, and on and on and on. So after this, I'm thinking, you know, how do you hold this? And I was so glad that there was going to be a meditation that night. And I remembered someone telling me that even the word Dharma comes from the word, Sanskrit word, to hold. And not in a grasping way, but in that way of trying to find that spaciousness in your heart and mind to just be with this. So it was great being with the community that night and having the meditation. And one of the poems that Jeff introduced us to was by Solzhenitsyn. I can never say that. If it were all so simple, if only there were evil people somewhere, insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? He also did a beautiful piece by Thich Nhat Hanh, calling by my true name, which you can Google. And I don't know, it was just very helpful to me. It sort of settled me down. And a few other things helped too. I was just in a cab with a woman one day who spoke, a Cambodian woman, spoke good English, and we were yakking about all kinds of things. And she asked me, did I see the killing fields? And I could feel that grip again. And I said, you know, your people seem so forgiving. Do you think it's about the Buddhism? And without missing a beat, she said, oh, with Buddhism, peace begins with each of us. And I felt like I was in the cab with Thich Nhat Hanh. And then she went on to talk about the Khmer Rouge and their youth and their ignorance with such compassion. And then she talked about karma. And, you know, I can say this because I'm Irish. If an Irish person talks about karma, it's those sons of so-and-so's are going to get theirs. And there was none of that edge. She could really just turn it over to something larger than herself. And then being on this mission with Chapa, the man who founded lost his whole family. But I didn't realize a lot of the doctors and dentists were children in these camps. And I was sitting next to someone on the bus, and we were talking, and it came up. And I said, how did you hold on to your spirit? And his sister was suicidal, so he felt he had to hold on for her. And that his father told him, when it's this bad, when the treachery is this bad, someone always intervenes. And even though his father didn't survive it, he held on to that until he could leave. And his story and every other story I heard, it's always the same, not only the content, but it's told in the spirit of, it's not about have sympathy for me or admire me, it's just told simply, this is what is. And it's just like another teacher. So so that meditation that night prepared me for entering the mission, the clinic. And that was a pretty overwhelming day. And maybe later you'll talk about the chaos of that first day. But something that, and there were all these people, like the sea of humanity, and where do you begin? And it's one by one. But the Cambodian people have a way of greeting. And I learned how to say welcome. And they do like we do, but it's so intentional. And they do the sampaya, where they bring their hands together. And you do it back. But it's very intentional, and the eyes meet, and something almost invariably happens. This joy comes across the face, like this sense of connection. And when they do it, it's almost like an embrace. And it was so helpful. I was talking with Dr. Paul about this. It's so grounding. And with all the people, it was a way of beginning afresh with each person. It was like a qigong of present moment. It was just such a beautiful thing. I wish we did it more here. And Jeff was telling you about the wonderful twins. Actually, the mom asked Nancy to name the twins because it was a special blessing. So I tease her that people will say, where did you get those weirdo names? And they'll tell the story of Nancy and David. And there'll be folk songs and everything else. And wonderful things happened every day, like Jeff mentioned with thalassemia. And there was a hematologist there who diagnosed it. And it's a dreadful disease. But you see it a lot more there because it's a natural protection to malaria. And there were a few people who had it. And when he diagnosed the family just wept because no one ever knew what was happening to their very sick and deformed son. And that boy was able, through international Googling, to get the treatment that he needed. And another mom had 2 children this way. And she was so relieved because she thought it meant she was evil to have such sick children. So there were many wonderful things that happened. And Dr. Rob did a class on thalassemia for the students. And there was a wonderful exchange with the med students. They were incredible interpreters, and you could watch them. They were so hungry for knowledge, and they'd get bolder and bolder, taking on more of the interview or wanting to do the hands-on of the blood pressures. And he was able to teach them about this disease. And they would share, that they are frightened of the future of medicine in Cambodia. And I think everybody just tried to encourage them in any way that you could, verbally or hooking them up with some institute. It was great. But there were also so many opportunities just to kind of watch your own process. And one of the things was with the dental piece, and I met the dentist on the plane, and he said that they plucked 600 teeth last year. And I'm thinking, is that a good thing? And he says, and there were 5 more dentists this year, so I don't know how many teeth were removed. And no, I don't know what they do with them. But then when I met the people, I understood it. I couldn't believe the teeth and the suffering and if they had teeth, the decay, and there was this natural aversion. But it was the same mouths that were smiling. So over time, I got used to the teeth. But I never got tired of the smiling. And to such a degree that later on I went to Vietnam, and there was a tribe where the women put black charcoal on their teeth. And I didn't have any aversion at all. I was sort of curious, and it was about aesthetics and protection. And I'm thinking, if they knew about my bleaching strips, I didn't think that was pretty far too. And then back to the clinic, so many people got help, but so many people didn't. I mean, so much was beyond our means. And I think everyone really struggled with feelings of frustration and uselessness and helplessness. And when you work in a developing country, you get to really feel it because you get to rub up against the lack of resources. And I really hit the wall probably the 4th day feeling this. And this lovely thing happened. And it could have happened to any volunteer. I was just lucky that our paths crossed. But 2 days before, I met this little girl. She was there with her family. And I knew they had passed through, and I saw her alone, so I was worried that she was lost, so I went over and asked her. She had really good English, and she explained that English had come to her school that year. But she must have just had a natural ability. And she, I guess to reassure me, she went and she got her mother. And I said, tell your mom I think your English is lovely. And she didn't. Then I convinced her to do it, and the mom just beamed with her decayed teeth. And then I just escorted them to wherever they needed to go. That was it. So here, this 4th day, I hit the wall. And this little girl comes back and in the sea of humanity finds me and had written a letter all in English about her family, and it became a love letter, and I'll never forget you, and don't forget me, and thank you, Big B. And she also said that she wanted to be a doctor, so I had her talk to one of the female medical students, so she was just over the top. But the last thing she said to the student was, tell her that my whole family thanks her for her smile. And I just melted, because what that meant, it was such a gift to us that the purpose of this mission, the loving kindness, did get felt, and it did matter. And I will never forget her. And so my parting words, there were those beautiful lotus, and I have a photo of one with a bee. And I just hope that Cambodia, out of all the muck, can flower again, and that people in a mutually beneficial way can kind of feel the nurture and the sweetness of the place. And I really hope that the people we worked with, we were there as the givers, could feel how much they give us. With their open-heartedness, their grace, they just stretched us, and in ways I don't think we'll ever regret.
My name is Pam, and this is Terry, and we were both part of the mission at Opot Wat, which was actually a totally different experience from my perspective than the medical mission. Can you say anything to start out?
Hello. Go ahead.
Okay. We didn't practice, so. I was pretty naive taking on the challenge of going on a medical mission. I really had a lot of expectations in my mind about what it would be like and what I thought I was going to encounter, and it was totally different. And so for me, the opportunity was really about working with myself and my expectations and my projections and my judgments and all the things that we do all the time on a pretty consistent, regular basis. And like Chris said, it's like 2 years of sitting in retreat. And we were at the orphanage, which was a lovely place. I mean, it was really very interesting, but very primitive on many levels. We had no assignments. We really had no, there was no expectation of us that we would do this or we would do that or anything. I think one of the most interesting things I got to do while I was there was wash the feet of the children who were told that if they didn't wash their feet and have their nails clipped, they couldn't participate in art that day. So a couple of us had the opportunity to sit and wash the feet of the children and interact. And again, they didn't speak English, so it was a lot of smiles and a lot of eye contact and really interesting things in that way. So there was a lot to be said about that. It was really an enriching experience, but challenging on another level, because we had to create for ourselves on a daily basis, what is it are we going to do to fill our day? And the conditions were hot, humid, a lot of poverty, a lot of spiders in our rooms, geckos on the wall, frogs under our pillows, the kind of things that you're really not expecting to encounter, or at least in my naive state, I wasn't expecting to encounter. So that was part of the work, and it was, you know, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was really one of the most valuable experiences of my life, but it was truly, truly an opportunity to work with myself. And when I think about service that I provided in Cambodia to the Cambodian people, I know that it was a mission of compassion and loving kindness, and I certainly felt and experienced that with the children, and with the people who were there, and with my co-worker or colleagues that were on the trip. But I really felt my job was to contribute to the Cambodian economy by purchasing things and spending money so that there was more abundance in their community. So, you know, it was varied. It was mixed. It was powerful. I'd do it again. So that's, to me, that says a lot that that I connected with the Cambodian people on that level. But I was also very impacted by the killing fields and the war, and took that in a way that I had never experienced in my life, and found that taking in that suffering and then spending time with children who were the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the survivors of the Khmer Rouge, you know, my personal suffering is nothing, absolutely nothing could be compared to anything like that. So it was just very, it was inspiring, it was really hard, it was a great teacher.
When I heard about a trip to Cambodia, I got really excited because I've always wanted to go to Vietnam. And then on top of it, it was going to be a medical mission. And I thought to myself, how wonderful is this going to be? And then I looked at the price, and the price was great. And Jeff was going to lead it, and so I was really prepared to have this life-changing experience and trip. And the way it started was that we had a 16-hour flight, and I brought the flu bug with me. So in the middle of the night, I had one of those opportunities to experience something that I didn't expect to. And so my resistance was down a little bit by the time we got into Phnom Penh. And again, to have it start by getting up and going to the prison and hearing how human beings treat each other, knowing that that was only a little over 30 years ago, and knowing more than that, that it goes on today. Impacted me in a way that I didn't expect. I sort of had this vision that it was going to be like a National Geographic trip, you know, or a 60-minute special. But to be thrown into a situation where you are with reality does test one's practice. And at the moment, I wasn't even thinking of my practice. I was thinking about dealing with the reality of the information that was coming at me. I was really excited because I was assigned to the orphanage, and I really like working with kids. And when we got there, we pulled up in this bus. It was a pretty long trip. We pulled up in this bus, and there were a whole bunch of kids there just waiting for us. And they're all these cute little faces, and they can't speak the language, and you can't speak the language. And the minute you get off the bus, they're grabbing your hands, and they're hugging you. And that was the day that I had the opportunity to take a tour of the orphanage. And what I found so interesting is that because it was a hospice originally, they have a crematorium on the property. They also have a place where they have pictures of many of the parents and many of the children who have died there, and their stories that are told by Wayne. And I was fascinated because it's a country that's been through so much pain, and yet the way they bring the children into the experience is that if somebody does die there, which does still happen with a few of the children, they lost somebody just about a year ago, everybody participates in the process, so that it's not a thing about somebody's dying, I don't want to see them. The children actually sat around in the room as this young boy was dying. They participated in taking him to the crematorium. Afterwards, they take some of the remains and they put them in a little container and they put them in a stupa, which is out back, and that's the way that they honor people that have passed. So it's much more of a normal process in a society that seems to take life and death in stride much better than I do. I was taken particularly by the children. I have grandkids that have so many toys. I'm in awe. And these children were playing with little pieces of plastic, sticks, old beat-up bikes. Jumping in water that was really brown. And some of them wore the same set of clothes the whole week we were there. It was an opportunity to see the beauty of human nature outside of my perspective, and to be reminded that most of the world lives like this. My world is very, very different. And I was truly humbled. I think another thing that really helped me was the opportunity to see Jeff and how beautifully he handled something that I would presume was a little bit challenging, not only in the work that he had to deal with, but the way he was able to turn perspective around just sometimes by asking certain questions. And I know that those of us at the orphanage that expected to be guided and told what to do and how we could help the kids, one day called and said, gee, there's nothing, they're not telling us what to do. And he had some simple line about, maybe this is your practice to not know what to do. And I have thought a lot about that particular question since I've been home. We don't really know what we're supposed to do. We sort of show up and do it. And this trip was like that. We showed up, we did it, and I am still in the process of discovering the way it has impacted me. I will never look at the world the same way. It was a life-changing experience. Yes, it was hard. Would I go back tomorrow? No, not tomorrow. But I think that I would not have missed it for the world, and I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity. And I will tell you that the Angkor beer is really good.
much time, but there's 3 other people who are on the trip here. I don't know if there's anything you were inspired to share from that, or you just want to let those words rest. You have a few moments. Chris or Ken, would you like to? Okay.
I'm Chris Batanti, and I want to thank you all for letting me be a part of this. I just sort of crashed your Sangha tonight. I live in Jamestown, and I'm a member of the Insight Meditation Central Valley. And I heard about this trip actually from a friend of mine who's Cambodian, who wanted to go herself, but she has children and lots of things that kept her at home. But I went to the original meeting and I found out about it, and I decided to go to honor my Cambodian friends in Modesto, particularly this family that had provided me with a place to stay for 2.5 years when I got reassigned to a 5-day-a-week job. I didn't want to commute from Jamestown to Modesto. It's about an hour. And they took me in. And to this day, if I need to stay there, all I have to do is call up and they say, oh, your bed's still here. So I let them know that I was going to do this to honor them. And it also opened the door for me to talk a little bit with my friend about their family's experience, because they never talk about it. I'm a clinical social worker. She's a clinician as well, and all of their siblings are college educated and professionals, and this is something in their past. But when I actually found out what had happened to them during this time, it was amazing to me how they have simply moved on and created a life for themselves here in the United States. This trip was also life-changing for me, and I can't imagine doing this mission without the support of our group and the daily meditation and the processing. That absolutely kept me grounded. And the only expectation that I had when I started on the trip was that somehow I would find a way to be helpful. I had no expectation that I would be comfortable during this trip, and indeed, that expectation was met. I have pretty severe arthritis in the back, and being on my feet all day, I mean, by the end of the day, people were saying to me, are you okay? Are you going to, and I would take the local transportation, which is called tuk-tuk, which is the little carriage that's pulled by a motorcycle. I would go out there, and of course they just swarm you, to try to get you to use theirs. And it was only 2 blocks, or 2 or 3 blocks to the guest house, but I knew I couldn't even make it that far. So fortunately, the tuk-tuks were there. I worked mostly as a gopher in this environment, and I'm a clinical social worker, so one afternoon I did spend some time in the mental health area. And I had wondered before I went, what would we do? How could we do counseling? Cross-culturally and, through an interpreter. But I was actually quite amazed at what happened when we sat down with somebody and an interpreter and just asked them to talk to us about their lives. And we heard the stories of what they go through on a daily basis. And I don't know how transformative what we did was in just, spending an hour with somebody. But you could see the transformation on people's faces when they came in very tense and anxious, and that's the reason the doctors were referring to us. And they left with huge smiles and, a koan to thank us for listening to them. and bearing witness to what they go through. And I wish I could have spent more time there. We didn't have enough interpreters. And I finally decided I didn't want to just sit there and watch other people counseling and not be useful. So I went back to being a gopher. On one morning, I got asked to give out eyeglasses, reading glasses, and we had thousands and thousands of them. So I just started giving them to anybody that came up, and I made a huge mess out of this station because word got out in the hospital. The staff started coming over to get their eyeglasses, and the powers that be did not like that I was giving out eyeglasses to just anyone, and it did kind of create a little bit of a stampede. So I had to admit that this was not a good fit for my skills. So I went back to being the Walmart greeter at the women's and children's pediatric clinic. So, which was a wonderful experience, just to watch the physicians and the other providers working with the translators. It was an amazing experience, just to see the level of presence that people have in this environment, and how one after another person would come up and talk with the providers. It was a wonderful experience, and part of it for me was meeting all the wonderful people that I met and making new friends, and just being a part of this exceptional experience. So I encourage anyone that's thinking that they might want to participate. It's worth whatever pain you have to go through. Definitely worth it. So thank you for letting me join you tonight.
Well, we're a little over 5 after 9, so I think I'll wrap it up. Sorry, Kent or Judy, if you wanted to say something, but thank you for coming out and sharing our memories and our images and stories. And this, for my perspective, is this, was a grand success. There was some hardships. And there's always the question of what good can we do, whether that's individually or as a group. But I think we did do good, and I think, the numbers are incredible. We saw over 10,000 patients, but I think just getting out there and the IWA enclave within the Chapa group. There was, I got a lot of comments from people. There's something different about your volunteers. They just seem, they kind of roll with the punches, and especially Chris. You were the model of equanimity. We had a surgeon yell at her one day. And everyone's just sometimes hot and frustrated, and this guy was fine. He wasn't on our team. He was one of the other, and she just said, fine. I'm just going to do my job, and she didn't get personal and didn't get back in his face. I was very impressed by that. And that was one example of many of just how our volunteers really embodied mindfulness and compassion in this difficult situation. So thank you. We hope to be out there again. We hope to go back to Cambodia next year. We still have to work out some details with that, but thanks for coming out tonight. And we'll be around for a few minutes if you wanted to ask any of us some questions. You all be safe and protected.